Ooh, that's quite satisfying. Welcome back to the channel, my name is Sam, and before we start I'd like to remind you all to please subscribe with notifications on. We upload videos at least once a week on photography, videography, music, gear, all that good stuff. So if you like any of that, please do subscribe, notifications on to stay updated on our latest videos. So if you've been following the channel mostly this year, you'll know that I've started to be really interested in film again. Particularly 35mm film and Super 8 motion film, and over Christmas I was given this. This is the Pentax ME Super SLR camera. Now I've actually had a reasonable amount of experience shooting with film. Back in the day, sort of late 90s, early 2000s, my parents had a big Nikon SLR camera, as well as obviously the smaller compact point and shoot. So I have had a reasonable amount of experience sort of when I was younger shooting 35mm film. And then again in college about 10 years ago, we used cameras very similar to this, although I don't think they were Pentax ME Supers. I know they were Pentax, and I know they used sort of the split prism manual focusing. I believe it was the Pentax LX, not the Pentax ME Super, but again sort of similar-ish style, except obviously the LX has a few more advanced features. And then of course, if you have been subscribed for a few months, you'll know we did recently resurrect Neil's Nikon F80, which is the camera I probably spent the most time using as far as 35mm is concerned, and one that we're still going to continue to use within sort of the channel and within Phase Drive. So I specifically wanted a Pentax based sort of manual focus sort of older style SLR camera, mostly because I've used Pentax before, and more importantly, I have a load of Pentax lenses, because if you've been subscribed for a little while, you'll know I'm a huge fan of vintage lenses, and the mount I like is the Pentax K mount. Now, at the moment, I've already got, obviously, my Vivitar 24mm, Hoya 35mm, Auto Chinon 50mm, and then a few other sort of lesser lenses lying around. So I already knew I had, you know, a selection, and the thing is, actually I've always wanted to use them for their original, you know, intended purpose. Now I've got to say a big thank you to my mum and her partner for getting me this. I just sort of on a whim said actually I'd really love one of these cameras, and I've been looking for the ME Super for a little while. That's the one I thought would be best suited to what I wanted, and I just sort of casually mentioned it, and my mum's partner managed to find one, and a really good deal. It came with this battery grip thing, came with the Pentax 50mm f1.7, which was on my lens list, so I'm really glad to get that. And then it came with a bag, a load of other stuff, and it also came with this, what is it? 80 to 200mm zoom lens, which I'm going to try at some other point. It also came with a roll of Kodak Gold Ultra 400 or something like that. I think it was Kodak Gold 400. Something that I assumed was quite expired. It was a 24 shot one, and I think it had been in the case for a little while. It also came with another roll of some other kind of film, which I don't really recognise. Kodacolor VR film. From expired 1988. This is 127 film, which I don't know if they develop. I don't know if it uses C41 process. If anyone's watching, you'll have to tell me if it uses a C41 or something similar. Over the Christmas period, I have tested this out with a few different rolls of film now. First off was the expired film, and I'm going to go through that because I've got the negatives back now, so I'll go through the expired film because that was quite an interesting experience in itself. So running through the basic features of the ME Super, it's got a basic auto function with a light meter that takes LR44 batteries, which are fairly common. It's not like trying to use the light meter with a Super 8 camera and they use the old Mercury style batteries, so they're either hard to find or they use like air cell, which lasts for like 2 minutes and it runs out. You've got a full manual mode. You've got a mode on here which is 125x, which is basically, it uses no power. If you run out of battery, it just shoots at a 125th shutter. You've got controls for exposure comp on the top here, as well as setting your ASA speed. You also have a bulb mode. Of course, it has a locking point here for a remote release cable. Open up the back. It's your pretty standard affair. Obviously, you've got the classic Pentax loading system, which I don't mind, but a lot of people aren't. That's the one thing that a lot of people kind of, some like, some don't like. The one thing I did find was the mirror sometimes gets a bit stuck. Again, it's just a little bit old. That's kind of what happens with these cameras. As far as I can tell, the light seals haven't gone too, you know, gummy, so they seem to work okay. It's a really nice viewfinder. I'll see if I can get a shot through the actual viewfinder. It's got a split prism, and it's also got the little kind of, I don't know what the other kind is, but it's got split prism in the center, and then around the edge it's got the other kind. I mean, overall you can see that works. If I put it on bulb mode, I can hold it open, see? So that's all working fine. So yeah, it was rather exciting to receive this for Christmas. Again, very, very grateful for it. And it was really exciting to actually try out some of my other lenses with it. So I've used the 50 quite a lot, but the one I've been really enjoying using on it is, of course, my 24mm Vivitar f2.8. That has been a fantastic lens, especially to use for night photography. Now, last night I did actually go out and I shot some Portra 160 night photography, and part of the reason I did that was purely because it's actually really hard to come across Kodak film at the moment. There's a shortage, and Portra 160, there does seem to be a reasonable supply. Obviously, there's quite a lot of black and white film knocking about at the moment, but to be honest, I've shot with black and white film. It's all right. I think the whole point of shooting film for me is the colours. The colours are what really makes it interesting, so I didn't really want to go shooting a load of black and white. I'm much more interested in the different kind of colour you can get from it. And so yes, I ended up using Portra 160 last night, and I've sent it off. There'll be another video on that. I've got a few ideas for it, so wait and see what we have to plan for that one. So the one film I have had back is the expired Kodak Gold Ultra 400. I think that's what it is. It's just the Kodak Gold 400. I suspect it was at least 15 or 20 plus years old, just based on the degradation that came back. I even had a warning from the lab. They said very old, and they were kind of apologetic that they hadn't come out so good. But actually, once I ran it through Photoshop and sort of tweaked the levels, I think I was able to get back something that was pretty decent. So I'm going to go through the images now, and you can see sort of what I've managed to do. So this is the selection of images that I got from my super duper expired Kodak Gold 400 film. I mean, initially, yes, so you've got kind of this kind of yellowy greeny kind of haze to it. This one was quite difficult to kind of bring back. But then you go to this next one here, and I was actually really happy with how it came out. I've got this is my dad and my nan, and I misfocus slightly. That does tend to happen with manual focus cameras. But I really like how it kind of comes out. Again, I kind of dig this kind of weird kind of faded effect. It's super noisy, super grainy. I haven't done a complete cleanup, and just as a side note, this is using GH5 scanning method with a kind of light table sort of thing. It's not perfect. I've got to kind of tweak it a bit because I've slightly blurred the edges because of the lens barrel distortion, but you know, for the most part, I'm pretty happy with how these scans came out, and I was more interested in getting the dynamic range and really kind of tweaking the colours with a proper sort of raw image as best I could. So next up we have another one, and again this was quite difficult to balance. I had to do quite a lot of tweakery, and I had to kind of, you know, use a bit of reference images. The problem is I'm colourblind, so it actually makes colour balancing quite difficult. So sometimes I do have to actually get like other people in who I know don't have colour blindness to tell me if it looks right. And I know it's still a bit off, but from what I'm told and from what I can see, because I'm not blind, I'm just, my colour sort of accuracy is slightly off. This was about as close as I could get it. This one was quite an interesting one actually. Again, so something about the ME Super that I was warned about before I get it is it tends to meter for the brightest part. And so if you've got anything remotely backlit, you need to put the exposure comp up to either 2 times or 4 times. And to be honest, I'm starting to think I should have used 4 times, basically almost for the entirety of it. And I did find that it was metering for the brightest parts almost always. So again, lesson learned. You know, you learn through trial and error. And you know, I'm still glad I went around and shot this. Again, this one, colours are slightly off. You know, I did what I could, but you know, again, it's very hard to colour balance sort of expired, especially if it's this expired. There are probably better ways of doing it. I'm not using any kind of plugin or anything. I'm just using the manual kind of Photoshop and levels method that I was taught to do. This one I really like actually. You know, you've got the reflection of the water here. This is again on the 24 if you couldn't tell already. Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's one of these things. If I just shot this with my phone, I'd be kind of like so-so about it, but there's something about the fact that it's shot on film, and again I actually spent time really thinking about the composure of the shot, and you've got my nan and my dad sort of going for a nice walk, and yeah, I quite like how this has kind of come about. Again, I'm quite happy with this one. There's a bit too much sort of going on the shadows. I probably could crop it a little bit, but I kind of like the fact you kind of almost got this kind of looking through the woods effect from it. Again, this one here, you can see that it's just not exposed at all for the shadows. I should have used exposure comp here. Again, lesson learned. But again, what I have found with this expired film, which I'm sure a lot of you kind of know, is it does okay in the kind of the highlights, but it's just in the shadows it completely falls apart, and you've kind of got this weird vignette going around kind of the bottom. This one was probably one of the best exposed. You can see again, it's all exposed for the shadows. We got some overcast lighting, so actually this worked out quite well as far as exposure goes. And again, I love the reflection. I focused kind of sort of halfway. I didn't want to focus completely to infinity. I wanted to kind of get a bit of background blur and isolation. This one I was quite happy with. This one, again, wish I'd exposed a bit more for the shadows. I quite like the kind of, the building kind of almost looks like it's looming in the background. That was quite interesting. This is actually an old army barracks that's been converted into flats, and it just looks quite kind of intimidating and menacing sort of behind the trees, so I quite like the look of that. Slightly underexposed here, just gonna have to get used to metering this properly. Quite like this sort of almost moat going around the tree here. You've got my shadow in there, and again, I didn't do a good enough cleanup. And again, this one particularly, I have noticed that the edges are quite blurred, and I'm pretty sure that's my scanning method, not to do with the lens necessarily. But yeah, I still like what's happened with this one. Now, this next one, it kind of was a disaster, but it also wasn't. I really like the silhouette effect, and funnily enough, the expired film thing, actually, I think it works here. This is kind of pretty much as shot. I haven't done too much to it. But I like the gradient that you get in the sky here. Obviously, there's no blowout of highlights at all. And yeah, I kind of like the weird sort of faded film silhouette look. This one, again, underexposed for the shadows. Really got to get used to that metering. There's not much more to say about this one. I don't really feel anything for it. It's funny. There's no kind of formula for whether whether a photo is good or not. It's just kind of, do you feel it? And this is something I'm finding with 35mm especially. Is like, either you feel it or you don't. With digital, I'm a lot more kind of almost mathematic about it, but this one is just, does it feel right? Yes or no? And I'm kind of just meh about it. This next one, my mum quite liked this one. Again, seriously underexposed. My mum quite liked this one because it kind of almost looks like a ghostly bench. And then I took another one when the sun came through, and you've got the kind of silhouette of the bench. Again, it metered for the brightest part of the image. And I kind of like how this came out. This is kind of cool. This is another one I really liked. Again, kind of a candid one, just walking through. Again, you can see, it seems to be more the left side of the film seems to have been more faded again. I don't know if that's just the film or if maybe there are some light leaks. I don't think they are light leaks because I'm not getting any kind of, it doesn't have the same characteristics of what I know to be light leaks, but This one, not happy with. Again, just sometimes exposing for the highlights and kind of leaving the shadows and silhouette works. This one just didn't. It might have worked better with a newer, not expired stock. Just didn't work for this one, I don't think. This one, I love this one. I just wish my dad had been smiling a little bit more. My nan, whenever she sees a camera, she just suddenly smiles. It's lovely. And I think the composition of this, I love the lighting. This, I did use exposure comp. I think it was 2 times. And I'm really happy with, overall with kind of sort of feel of this one. Again, just not really feeling this. On a small screen it doesn't look so bad, but if you blow it up, it just kind of meh. That's all I can really say for this one. Oh, this was a disaster. I'm not even going to talk about this one. This one could have been nice. I'm a bit surprised that it was as underexposed as it was, because this was the brightest part of the image. So I'm not really sure what's gone on here. Maybe it's just a particularly degraded frame of the film, but it just fell apart. Again, I probably could do more with it, but I didn't want to go crazy and start kind of completely changing the actual kind of aesthetics of what the film was producing. This one, again, didn't do any exposure comp, but this one I did, which came out a bit better. I should have used the 4 times exposure comp because, again, in the background where the man stood, that's kind of where the brightest parts are, and again, it seems to have metered for that. That seems to be a common thing with it. But actually, if I'd have exposed this a bit better, this would have been a really nice photo. But, it's still nice in its own right. And then this one, again, I don't really feel anything for it. There was one other on the roll which I didn't get around to scanning. But, yeah, it is what it is. So there we have it. That is my first real experience with the Pentax ME Super. I'm really excited to own this thing. Really impressed with just how it all feels. The fact it's in such great condition, almost 40 years since it was released. So this camera probably is about 40 years old now, which is quite amazing when you think about it. Everything seems to work. The timer's a little bit kind of finicky, but it does work. As I said, I'm able to use a cable release, and I used a load last night, so I'm looking forward to seeing how those Portra 160 night photos came out. So if anyone is in the market for a Pentax manual SLR or sort of Pentax manual focus SLR. I can highly recommend the ME Super. I think it's friendly enough to people who are kind of just getting into it. It's not limited enough so it's just auto. You've got enough manual features, and also it just feels nice. I really like the feel of it. So there we go. I hope you all enjoyed that. We will see you in the next one. There will be more videos on 35mm film. We've also got videos coming up on video production, plenty on music production. If you did enjoy, please subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.